Good morning from Mexico. Day 3. Today is the most exciting day here in Mexico, and that is because we're going to Outback Steakhouse Cancun. And you might be saying to yourself, Taylor, that's a really silly thing to be doing. Why would you go to Outback Steakhouse in Cancun? There are so many other non-touristy places you can find within a reasonable drive that have delicious food, and you'd be supporting a local entrepreneur and doing all kinds of good things for the community and the world at large. But we think it's funnier to go to Outback Steakhouse, so we're going to be doing that. The other brand ambassador with me here is my best man, Alex, and together we just really want to go to Outback. And I think the two of us, it's going to be a group of 8 that get on this transfer to go to Outback Steakhouse. And I think that we're the only 2 that really care. I think everyone else is a little bit disappointed, but they're willing to put up with us because we're so passionate about visiting Outback Steakhouse Cancun. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're also going to the Isle of Dogs. It's not actually the Isle of Dogs. It's an island off the coast of Cancun. It's a normal island, but it also has a dog shelter on it. And the last time that our friend Nova was here, I'll have Nova on the podcast sometime to talk more about it, give you more details, because it's really relevant to your career as a photographer. She took a taxi. So she was here with her husband, Matt. Matt had a lot of work to do. She was like, I'm going to go to this island and get a dog for her sister. So she hops in a taxi, drives the 45 minutes to Cancun, gets on the ferry that's like a 20-minute ferry over to this island of dogs, signs the paperwork to adopt this Mexican rescue dog that's out there just like living life on an island, and then takes the ferry back, gets back in a taxi, and comes all the way back to the resort. And then when they're flying home, the dog meets them at the airport and gets on the airplane, and now that dog lives in Toronto. So today, Nova's husband is not here, and there is a 95% chance that he is going to be surprised when Nova gets home with a dog, whether he wants a dog or not. I think he's getting a dog. And then also Alex, the other Outback Steakhouse champion, will be getting another dog, I believe. So it's dog shopping day here in Mexico, which is not a traditional tourist activity, but we like to keep it outside of the box by going to Outback Steakhouse and rescuing dogs. Today we're talking about lenses for wedding photography. Tina asked, she dropped a question in my Instagram questions that you'd like answered on the podcast, and today I'm just going to talk about lenses. Might not be the most exciting topic, especially if you're not really into gear. I'm going to begin this episode with my favorite lens, and my favorite lens is the Nikon, or the Tamron 85mm 1.8, actually. So that is, if I could only shoot a wedding with one lens, it would be that lens. And that might sound crazy because you're like, what if you need like a wide angle to get like a family shot? And my answer is that you can usually find a space where you can walk backwards far enough to use an 85mm lens for that. But the realistic answer is you also have a 35 on a second body. I like the 85 because it gives really sharp, or really, I guess, like good depth of field, not necessarily sharpness in the background out of focus, but it gives a really nice focus fall off that the background is really nicely out of focus. There's good subject isolation and separation. And as a wedding photographer, it's like, I find myself in a lot of circumstances that I really don't want most of the background elements in there. Like if you're getting ready in a hotel, you don't really want like the signs on the back of the door for like the fire, like how to get out of the hotel in case of a fire, like things like that, and like all the signage all around the room, like any of the food that they have. You don't want all of that in focus. But if you're shooting with an 85, you can blur those elements out in a way that they might still exist, that they might still be distracting to you because you know what they are. But for the most part, if you're flipping through the gallery, even if they do happen to creep into your frame a little bit, they're not going to ruin the photo. Whereas if you're shooting with like a 24-70, like f4 or something, pretty much everything's just gonna be in focus all the time, and I'm not really into that look and feel. I talked about it a long time on YouTube ago about that wasn't really a proper sentence, but a while ago I made a video about how I actually really don't like the 24-70 for wedding photography. I find that it makes me too lazy. I also don't really love the images that come off of it because everything is in focus. I also don't like the way that you'll be jumping from, like, you'll shoot a frame at 24 and then 28 and then 35 and then like 50. And I don't feel like there is ever enough impact, I guess, between those images. So for instance, my usual kit is I'm shooting an 85 on one body and a 35 on one body, or a 24 on that body. And I like the separation going from specifically like 24 to 85. You get a very, very distinct image and something that is really cohesive and consistent throughout the entire wedding gallery. And I feel like every image, when you're photographing in that way, has a specific, it has like a power to it, where the wide image looks great, and then you punch into something with really nice soft out of focus backgrounds, and all of the images feel a certain way. And I find that if I'm shooting like a 24 to 70, even at 2.8, that none of the images specifically give me that feeling over an entire gallery. Obviously, you're going to be able to photograph like a few amazing photos at any wedding with really any equipment, but I find that I get a higher yield by shooting two bodies that maybe I do miss a couple images here and there because I don't have the full focal range available to me at any point. But I really do feel like the quality of the images that I do deliver outweighs the missed potential opportunities. And also, like, as a wedding photographer, you're always, I feel like we're just kind of too hard on ourselves, that if we miss like a good candid like moment of like the mom with like her dad or something like that, that maybe you deliver an image that's not like 100% as good as it could have been, because like he's a little bit too out of focus or something because you shot it with an 85 and the depth of field is just really thin. But I think that if you're able to kind of like step back from that and be like, okay, I'll find that image another time. I'll get another image of the mom that's even better, and I'll get a better image of her dad or their grandpa, even better than that moment would have been. So I kind of find those missed opportunities as motivation to create better work. And I find that the 85 is the correct tool for me. It's also because I've just used it for so many things over my lifetime as a photographer, that it's like really the absolute best thing for me when I'm out like photographing families, that I know exactly where those frame lines are, that I don't have to pick up my camera to see like, oh, am I far enough away? I know exactly where to go in order to get that depth of field. That is something that comes with just a lot of experience. And whether you choose a 50 or an 85 or a 35, just know that if you really do master a lens that you really connect with, you will do lots of amazing things with it. And then just stop listening to what other people have to say on the internet, because if you found the lens for you, if you found what best works in your workflow, I think that is what you should be doing. You shouldn't be listening to somebody else, even if it is me that's like, I love the 85. If you hate the 85, if you feel, I think like the one complaint of the 85 millimeter lens and any longer lens, really, like a 7200, is that you are too removed from the scene. So if you really do feel that you feel like if you shoot with an 85 that you're not even part of the scene, and your style and your flow is that you want to be shooting with that 35, you want to be with that 24, and like integrate it into the scene, because it is true, like the cliche of like, if you don't like the image you're taking, step closer to it. And I think that's 100% true. I am just a very introverted person, so I rely a little bit on the longer focal lengths. And I also really like that subject separation. If you like getting up there nice and close and you have that personality that you can be like a foot away from somebody and also invisible, which I have seen photographers do, like street photographers. Andrew Funderburg, I was with him a couple months ago in Portland, and his strategy was just like, for street photography, if you just look like you're supposed to be there and you look like you know what you're doing and you just like don't ask for permission, you just like, it's just what you do, just like, and do it with purpose and do it with full confidence that like this image is going to be awesome. He can get like right in there with like groups of random strangers like playing bocce ball on the streets of Portland, or like in the park in Portland, I guess. And he can really do like amazing things like that. I can't do that, and I would be much more comfortable with an 85. Maybe that's like something for me to work on over the next little bit, is to get more comfortable being closer to my subjects. I am comfortable in the sense, so I've noticed it a few times over the past year, and shooting with my 24 at 1.4, I really love getting close to the subject, so the background is actually like really out of focus. And I find that if you can get good depth of field with a wide angle lens that looks really nice, it's like, it's a really, really cool and unique image that you don't really see often. So I've kind of found myself embedding, like, usually it's as the couple, like in the recessional, they walk down the aisle and all their like wedding party comes up to meet them, and their friends and family, and they kind of start like this, like, I don't know, like almost a mob of a receiving line. And I found that if I am like embedded right there, I can easily shoot with a 24 or 35 and I can be really close and really invisible because in that moment, it's just kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. And I found that I get some really, really fantastic images from that. Are those images better than if I would have shot the exact same image with an 85? I don't think so. But it's something different for what I'm doing. And I think that if you do become really, really just like I use that 85 so much, if I was to do the same coverage on a 24, I feel like it makes you want a better photographer, and it makes you just like, it makes things new and interesting again, which I think is just as important, especially if you are somebody that's been a photographer for a long time. So I like my 85, I like my 24. The Tamron 35 1.8 is also really good. I guess one thing that I haven't really covered is that I do dual photo video coverage. And by doing dual photo video coverage, it does create some challenges. That challenge is mainly that there's no in-body stabilization in my camera bodies in my Nikon D850. So I have to use lenses. I have to use prime lenses with stabilization in the lens. And as a Nikon shooter, you have to go to the Tamron products, as funny as that is. If you're a Canon shooter, you have a 35 that's stabilized, you have an 85 that's stabilized, and a few other primes that are stabilized. As a Nikon shooter, I have to go off-brand, sadly. Hopefully that improves at some point. But for now, I'm kind of stuck using these Tamron lenses. Fortunately enough, they are good lenses, though. So I'm quite happy that that there is a good product to fill that void. And the 85 also has VC, which is stabilization as well. The other lens that I use fairly often in weddings, you'll see me if you've seen any of the behind the scenes videos for the ceremony, I'm always on my 7200. And that's the 2.8 FL. And it's like, I would say one of the nicest lenses that exists for wedding photographers. Every image that comes off of that lens looks like you've shot it with a prime. So I guess that's maybe my affinity towards it, just like the way that the images render and the separation and the colors and I don't know, the way that the lens behaves and the characteristics. I think that it looks like a prime lens, so I use that a lot as well. If I'm doing photography only coverage, I'm using my Nikon 58mm 1.4 quite a lot. I really, really love that lens. There's a bit of a learning curve. It's definitely a very interesting lens. If you screw up an image, you learn pretty quickly to like not shoot in high contrast situations at 1.4, and you just kind of like learn the limitations of it, and it kind of makes it fun and interesting. So I really love that lens. I also love the smallness and the lightness of it, but unfortunately it's not stabilized, so I can't use it at very many weddings since I'm usually doing hybrid coverage. I also love the Nikon 105 1.4. If I could only have one lens, if I'm just like out doing photos for like social media of like headshots of somebody, or really, really anything that I have control over my circumstances that's not a family shoot, I will be using this 105. If I had more people, if I have to do like photos of 2 people or like 3 people in a group, I usually shy away from it just because I really like to play with that really thin depth of field, and I kind of gamble on being a little bit too thin most of the time. And if there's a few people and they all need to be sharp and they're putting it up on like a billboard, I feel like I'm kind of not really utilizing that lens to be shooting at 2.8. So in that circumstance, I'll usually just go with an 85, and that's just kind of my main normal portrait lens. Yeah, that's about it. I don't use any super wides. Tim is usually my second photographer, and a lot of the time he has his 15 to 30 Sigma. It's actually really nice. And that is a fantastic lens as well. Beyond that, I don't use any of the Sigma art lenses anymore. I have no problems with them. They're really fantastic, but I think that they're just like almost a little bit too perfect. And I know that doesn't really make any sense, but I like all the Nikon lenses that I've talked about and the Tamron lenses because there is a certain amount of character to them, the way that they vignette, the way that they aren't perfect. It doesn't look like I don't know, like a production film every single time. It's not like cinema glass. It is something with like a little bit of flaw to it, something that flares a little bit weird. I like weird flare. The one complaint I actually have about the beautiful 7200 Nikon FL is the fact that it doesn't really flare, and there's nothing you can do to make it like flare as good as the older versions could. So one thing I actually do, and I'll make a video or something about this, I don't know how this is going to translate, but I don't really clean off my lenses ever. I want there to be like a dusty coating on the front, which is like super counterintuitive. But when you're photographing like directly into the sun, so the dust won't really make any difference if it's like daytime and there's no light on it, because if if you're like me, I'm always shooting at 2.8. So you don't really see, there's no negative quality because of that dust really. But where it really does help is if the sun is like coming right down the barrel of the lens or like a little bit off to the side and just catching that dust and lighting it up a little bit, you get like the coolest yellow orange flare. So that's why I don't clean my lenses. And Marshall, who photographs with me from time to time, it really bothers him and he can't really handle it. But I like to do it. I like the way that like negatively happens in that moment, and it just like creates weird, interesting things that you could not create in post-production. It creates a softness that you can never really replicate, and that on the day like that, whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen, and it's going to make it look amazing. And you kind of work within the guidelines of whatever's happening, whatever's looking good, and just like pivot from that and increment and keep doing new stuff and creating new and interesting things, and not having to do anything really in post-production because you've created all this cool, interesting light within your camera. But if you're using a really good lens that's really clean, the Nikon one at least is going to handle that flare really well, and you're not going to see that warmth layer and like the interesting things from it. So that's why I don't really clean my lenses. All right, thanks for listening today. I'm Taylor Jackson, and I will see you tomorrow from Mexico again after Outback Steakhouse. Everybody loves Outback, right? Maybe. I don't know you. Also, my wife's a vegetarian, so she doesn't really love Outback Steakhouse because they fry all their stuff in beef tallow, which is really delicious, also super terrible for you, and also not vegetarian. So even the French fries aren't vegetarian there. Surprise, right? See you tomorrow.